therapeutic program at Moline. At Moline. So, yeah.
All right. So today I'm interviewing Shannon Geralds. Is that saying that correctly?
Yes.
All right. For an elementary classroom position with Ritter School District. Today is May 17th, and my name is Kevin Bruce. So, Shannon, you're meeting with a new student. What would be your most important priority?
I think the first thing that I would want to know is a little bit about the student, what their interests are, how I can kind of grab their attention in the classroom with what we're working on. If there's anything that they don't like about school, so I know what challenges we might have in the classroom, and maybe a little bit about their, their family background, religious beliefs, cultural beliefs, things like that, so that I can find a way to relate to them.
Why would you say that's your most important priority?
I think building relationships with students is the number one key to being able to have academic success with them. They need to know that I'm interested in them, that I care about them as a person, so that they're more willing to do the things that are more of a struggle for them when I ask them to, and we can work together on that with that relationship in place.
You overhear two students talking about being treated unfairly by you. What would be your first thought?
I would probably want to find a time to sit down with them and say, hey, I overheard you saying this. Can you tell me more about why you feel that way? And so we can find a way to work through that, because that's not something I ever want my students to feel about me. I want everyone to feel safe in my classroom.
Okay. So how do you, or how would you ensure that you are treating all students fairly?
I think I would probably look at, again, the background, where they're coming from. There are some students who might have some triggers that other students might not have that I would think is perfectly normal, but that might be a trigger for that student. So knowing their backgrounds and looking at if any students have IEPs to make sure that they're getting the supports in my classroom that they need through their IEPs. And for students who don't have IEPs but maybe are low in other areas, so academically I'm finding ways to be fair and supportive to them, but then also emotionally just treating every child the way that they need, because each child requires a different relationship.
Is it likely that a parent might accuse you of not understanding his or her point of view regarding his or her child?
I don't think so. I've never had a parent say that. I feel like I have a pretty good relationship with parents and with students, and I can relate to them and what they need for their children.
Okay. One of your colleagues tells you to always validate the feelings of a student. Is that a good idea?
I think it is.
How do you, or how would you validate the feelings of a student?
Again, that relationship, having that relationship with that student to where they know that I'm always willing to listen to how they're feeling. Everyone needs to know that their opinions are valid. And so having those conversations with students about what their struggle is or what their concern is, so that they know they're being heard, and then we can work out a solution of how that will best work in the classroom.
A student teacher is teaching your class and has a wonderful idea to make the class more interesting. You are concerned that the idea will affect the amount of content to be covered. Could that be a real situation?
It absolutely could.
Okay. How would you handle that situation with your student teacher?
Having a conversation with that student teacher about my concerns. Again, same as with the students, validating that idea, especially if it's a really good idea, and maybe finding a way to compromise and find a way to make that idea work that will still cover the content that needs to be covered, having a balance.
Do you design and write out lesson plans in detail for an activity or for a unit?
Yes.
Can you tell me what is the essential component that you must include in your lesson plan to make sure students are learning?
I think there's a couple. You have to find a way to get them interested right off the bat, and also find out what they already know. Because if you're spending a lot of time covering information that they're already aware of, you're missing an opportunity to dive deeper. So you have to have that beginning piece, and then I always do an I do, we do, and you do as part of my lesson. So I instruct and model, then we do a guided practice together, and then I give them a chance to work independently, and then I assess either formally or informally to make sure that they got that skill or concept during the independent practice to where I can go back over it if we need to.
Okay. As a teacher, how important is your classroom learning environment?
I think it's extremely important.
When you are organizing the environment, what would you be sure to accentuate?
I look at furniture placement, I look at optional seating, I look at having areas like a classroom library where students can go, even to how many things are on my walls for students who have attention deficits, where that might be something that gets them off task because there's so many things that they're looking at. So trying to find that right balance to accommodate all of the students.
Your team of teachers is having a serious discussion about the issue of teaching specific facts or applied learning to students. Would you participate in the conversation?
Probably.
What would be your input regarding that specific issue?
I think, from my opinion, a lot of my beliefs are a balance of both. You have to teach the facts, but you also have to give the kids a chance to extend that further and apply those facts to real life situations.
A colleague of yours is really motivated when he or she works with students. What effect would that have on student learning?
I think it's extremely important. It has a big impact.
Okay. What do you do each day for yourself to stay mentally motivated to work with students?
I try to eat healthy. I try to exercise and take time for myself at night to prepare myself for the next day. And then each morning, as I'm thinking over my day and what's coming, I'm looking for different ways that I can connect with those students to make their day enjoyable.
Your principal asks you to partner with a parent of a student in your classroom. How would you respond?
Absolutely.
Okay. How do you or how would you build partnerships with parents to enhance student learning?
I try to contact parents on a regular basis so that we have that relationship. I try to make positive contacts for parents. That way, when there's a negative situation that comes up, the parents are more likely to respond because we already have that relationship. And just being able to know that we're on the same page. So that way, when situations like that come up and we do need to partner on something, whether it's for the benefit of the school or specifically for their child, we're already in that place where we have that relationship to be able to work together.
Your team members are discussing the principal's expectation to meet the unique learning needs of all culturally diverse students. Would you support your principal's expectation?
Yes.
How would you meet the unique learning needs of all of your culturally diverse students?
Again, I think going back to knowing their backgrounds, knowing what that culture is, where they're coming from, so that I can pull in real examples that they might come across that because of their culture or their background, to help prepare them for those situations, and finding ways to relate the academic content to where it makes sense with the culture that they're coming from.
How do you or how would you want students to describe you to their friends?
I think that my room is a safe place, that I care about them, and that they enjoy being in my classroom.
Why do you want your students to describe you that way?
So I think that's a key component to them wanting to come to my room every day and learn and put in the work that it takes to learn what we need to do for that year.
A student believes that you were not fair in grading her last exam. What would you do?
Have a conversation with that student, let them explain to me why. Maybe we can go over the exam, sit down, go question by question that they got wrong, and I can explain why I graded it the way they did, and then have them also tell me their concerns about why they feel that was not the grade that they thought they deserved.
Okay. Why did you or why would you respond in that manner?
So I think it's important for students to feel heard and to be instrumental in their own learning. So if they're willing to step up and advocate and say, I don't feel like this was fair, then they definitely deserve to be heard and have a conversation about that.
Could two students engaged in a conversation respond disrespectfully to each other?
Yes.
Okay. If you overhear that kind of conversation, what actions would you take?
I would find a time to meet with both of those students. I'm really big on having conversations with students about things that are happening in the classroom or in the school. And hopefully I have the relationships with those students to be able to pull them aside and say, hey, this wasn't really appropriate. This isn't how we talk to each other. This isn't how we create a good classroom environment or school environment. So how can we work through this?
Many teachers want to have a celebration for a colleague who has won a national teaching award. Some apathetic teachers are resisting the idea. Does that sound like a real situation?
Mm-hmm.
What actions would you take?
I would definitely participate. If there's a committee to put things together, I would join that. I don't know that I would necessarily go out of my way to convince the teachers because I feel like their opinions are valid too, but try to create an excitement about what that teacher has accomplished to pull more people into that willingness to celebrate it.
A student is not achieving in your class. You believe the student has a lot of talent. Could that occur in your classroom?
Yes.
What actions would you take to bring about a change in the student's performance?
Again, I try to have a conversation with that student and say, hey, I've noticed this issue. What is it that is keeping you from the learning in the classroom? What is it that's stopping you because you have this talent? And those are conversations that I have had with students. And we try to find things that interest them that I can pull into the curriculum. Maybe a book they can read that applies to that learning, something like that.
As a cooperating teacher, would you seek feedback from your student teacher to enhance your As a cooperating teacher, would you seek feedback from your student teacher to enhance student learning?
Yes, absolutely.
What strategies would you use to collect such information from your student teacher?
Again, just conversations about what they're observing, but then also having somebody in the room would be a good opportunity to maybe have them actually track specific data for me that I'm looking to see, am I implementing this? Are students engaging? And asking them to maybe use some sort of data tracking method when they're observing to help me with that. And then that also can help them when they're ready to take over the teaching to incorporate some of those things that we've talked about.
Could a colleague's teaching style be way too student-centered?
That one's tough. I think it could be, yes.
The proposed curriculum guide requires you to spend more time with students on classroom learning and less time on real-world application. Is that a good idea?
I think it needs to be a balance.
What would you say to your principal in that situation?
I would absolutely do whatever the principal required, but if there was an opportunity to talk to them about my feelings and why it would be good to maybe balance it a little bit better and offer my opinions if they were open to it, I would do that.
Okay. One of your colleagues believes every student in his or her classroom can be motivated to learn. Is that realistic?
Yes.
How do you get all students to learn?
I think it's about finding that trigger for them that pulls them into that learning, that excites them, finding a way to connect that learning and make it real for them so that they are interested in it.
Your school has an initiative to partner on a project with a business person in your community. How would you respond?
I would be willing to participate, absolutely.
How would you connect that partnership to student learning?
I think any real-life application for students is important for them to see why what they're doing every day for 18 years is applicable to after school life. So if I'm able to participate in something like that, then I can bring that into my classroom and say, look, this is something I'm doing. Let's find a way to bring this in, and how can you guys help me with this? How can we find ways that you can participate in that too?
Your students are not understanding the worth and dignity of classmates who are different. Is that possible?
Yes.
What would you do to bring about a change?
Part of what I do in my classroom is at the beginning of the year, having conversations about how every student is different. Every student needs different things in order to be successful, and talking about different examples of ways that the kids might be able to understand that and translate that over to the classroom, and having discussions about what that looks like in our classroom and how we can all help each other and trying to create a community.
Shannon, I think that is my last question. for
Okay.
you. Do you have any questions for me about the process or about positions or?
I think you kind of answered it. After this, then you said it goes out to, you let other building principals know, and so then they would call for interviews if they were interested?
Correct. So
Okay.
we're running a little bit behind. We had the restructuring of the gifted program.
Yes.
So because of that and the placement of teachers who are not going to be in those, in the center, it was
Mhm.
just, we were delayed. And so what we're doing is screening now, did them the last 2 weeks and did some yesterday, today, tomorrow. And then, we'll send your name. So Booter, Marvin, and Iveland, all three have openings.
Okay.
Iveland actually, Marvin has one, Booter has three.
Two or three, I think.
And then Ivan actually has 4.
Oh, okay.
And so, but then the principals, it's up to them to reach out and schedule interviews. And so the
Right.
reality could be, you get a call from one, you get a call from all 3.
Right.
Unfortunately, we've tried doing group things before, and then it turns
Mhm.
like, well, I want to know, and there's no way to decide. So it's kind of
Right.
whoever gets to you first and interviews you and can move on it. But
Okay.
I would expect, we would like to have as many positions filled as possible by the June board meeting. So I would
Oh, okay.
expect soon, knowing also that most people have signed contracts or are
Right.
tendering another contract
Right.
for next year, we would like
Mhm.
to, after June 1, it gets a little bit more difficult.
Perfect,
to get people
yes.
out. So I would expect, to hear, I think Jen Singleton was actually hoping to do some interviews later this week. So
Okay.
I would expect to
Great.
hear something pretty soon.
Great.
All right.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you for coming in, and